Today is June 1st, 2026, day 93 of the Iran and United States standoff. And what happened this past weekend over the Strait of Hormuz is simultaneously the most operationally significant military engagement of the entire ceasefire period and the most diplomatically revealing moment of the entire 93-day conflict. Here is the situation in the plainest possible terms. Iran deliberately shot down an American MQ-1 Predator or MQ-9 Reaper drone that was flying unarmed surveillance missions over international waters in the Gulf region, not over Iranian territory. Not within Iran's 13.8-mile coastal jurisdiction. Over international waters where American military assets have every legal right to operate under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and under every principle of international maritime and aviation law. The IRGC Aerospace Force tracked the drone using electro-optical sensors, developed a targeting solution, and fired. The drone went down. And then the United States military responded the way it has been responding to every Iranian military provocation throughout this conflict. Not with a phone call, not with a strongly worded statement, not with a diplomatic protest, but with fighter jets overhead within hours and precision strikes that turned Keshem Island's entire radar network and drone command and control infrastructure into rubble. The command and control node at Gora, the brain of the IRGC's entire surveillance and coordination operation over the Strait of Hormuz, was destroyed. The radar sites that gave the IRGC its eyes over the world's most strategically important waterway were eliminated. 2 Iranian one-way attack drones that were already airborne and targeting ships in the strait were intercepted and destroyed. And then, as if following a script nobody could have written because the absurdity would have been too extreme, Iran responded to the American strikes by firing 2 ballistic missiles at American forces in Kuwait. Both were intercepted. 0 American casualties. And CENTCOM posted the entire breakdown of what happened on X, methodically, precisely, and without any diplomatic softening that would give Iran a narrative to exploit. But here's the element of this entire weekend that changes the strategic picture more dramatically than the drone shoot-down, the Keshem Island strikes, the ballistic missiles, and the interceptions combined. At the exact same moment that the drone was being shot down over international waters, and the American fighter jets were taking off to eliminate the radar network that shot it down, President Trump had dispatched a physical human courier carrying a revised memorandum of understanding, the formal terms for an extended 60-day ceasefire framework, to Mojtaba Khamenei's underground compound, where the supreme leader has been communicating through human couriers because he does not trust any electronic communication channel. The courier had not returned from the compound when both sides pulled the triggers this weekend. The peace proposal and the fighter jets were airborne at the same time. And then, on top of everything else, this morning, Iran International is reporting that Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has submitted a resignation letter to the Supreme Leader's office, citing that hardline IRGC factions have completely taken over major government decisions and sidelined the civilian government entirely. If that report has any truth to it, the people of the United States has been negotiating a peace deal within Doha may not actually control the people who are shooting down American drones over international waters and firing ballistic missiles at Kuwait. Welcome to June 1st, 2026. The most diplomatically chaotic and operationally revealing single weekend of the entire conflict. But let us back all the way up. Because do you understand why everything that happened this weekend is connected to a single underlying reality about who actually controls Iran's decision-making? You need to understand the drone shoot-down's operational context, what Keshem Island is, and why destroying its radar network changes the military picture in the strait. How the EA-18G Growler executed the Keshem strikes with a kill chain that is one of the most technically precise sequences in modern electronic warfare. What the courier situation tells you about the simultaneous existence of a diplomatic track and a military track that are not coordinating with each other, and why the Pezeshkian resignation report is either the most significant single intelligence indicator of the conflict's endgame, or an Iranian disinformation operation designed to lower American expectations about what the civilian diplomatic faction can deliver. Start with the drone shoot-down, because understanding why Iran chose to shoot down this specific drone at this specific moment matters more than the tactical details of the engagement. The MQ-1 Predator, or MQ-9 Reaper, that was shot down, was conducting unarmed surveillance over international waters. Unarmed. No weapons payload, no attack capability, a purely surveillance mission in international airspace over international waters. Iran used electro-optical sensors, the passive optical tracking cameras that China has been reportedly supplying to Iran as a counter to the harm missile vulnerability of radar-based tracking, to locate, track, and develop a targeting solution on the drone. The released footage shows the sequence clearly. Iranian operators tracking the drone's position with an optical system, refining the targeting solution, and then the strike being executed. The drone came down. The IRGC Aerospace Force Commander Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh went on Iranian state television and claimed personal credit for the shootdown. He stated publicly, and this is a direct quote, that the IRGC reserves the legitimate and definite right to retaliate against any ceasefire violation by the United States. The man who personally ordered the shootdown of an unarmed American surveillance drone operating in international airspace then described that shootdown as a retaliation against a ceasefire violation. He claimed the drone was the violation. America flying an unarmed surveillance drone in international airspace was, according to the IRGC commander who ordered it shot down, the ceasefire violation that justified the shooting. This is the IRGC's information strategy in one sentence. Whatever action the IRGC takes is legitimate self-defense. Whatever response America provides is a ceasefire violation. The IRGC shoots down American drones. America's operation of those drones is the violation. The IRGC fires ballistic missiles at Kuwait. America's response is the escalation. The entire framework is designed to make the IRGC's aggression the baseline against which American self-defense is measured as escalatory. Now let me give you Keshem Island in complete detail, because understanding what this island is and why it was targeted tells you more about the American response's strategic significance than any statement CENTCOM could release. Keshem Island is the largest island in the Persian Gulf, sitting directly inside the Strait of Hormuz, adjacent to Bandar Abbas. It is the IRGC's primary forward operating position inside the strait itself, not on the mainland coast, but inside the navigable waterway. The IRGC has built an extensive infrastructure on Keshem and on the smaller Hormuz island nearby that constitutes what military analysts describe as Iran's eyes over the strait. Radar sites positioned to track every ship transiting the navigable channel, radio towers providing communication links between IRGC naval units, drone launch positions, and the command headquarters at Bandar Abbas. Command and control nodes that coordinate the IRGC's drone interdiction network, its fast attack boat operations, and its surveillance of commercial shipping. The drone control station at Gora specifically served as the brain coordinating IRGC drone operations in the Strait region. Every one-way attack drone the IRGC launched against ships in the Strait during the conflict was coordinated through the communication infrastructure that Gora provided. Without Gora talking to the drone launch teams, drone operations in the Strait must fall back on less capable backup communication systems that provide less precise coordination and less reliable launch authorization. The radar network on Keshem provided the tracking data that allowed the IRGC to know where American and Allied ships were positioned in the Strait at any moment. Without that radar network, the IRGC's situational awareness over the Strait is dramatically reduced, limited to whatever optical and passive sensor coverage it can maintain from the mainland coast and from any surviving island positions. Destroying Keshem Island's radar network and the Gora command and control station in a single strike package did not simply respond to the drone shootdown. It eliminated the operational infrastructure that made coordinated Iranian military action in the Strait possible at the level of sophistication the IRGC has been operating at for 93 days. This is why the American response happened within hours rather than days. Speed mattered. Every hour that Keshem's radar network remained operational after the drone shootdown was an hour the IRGC could use that network to coordinate additional attacks. Taking it down fast was the operational priority, and CENTCOM executed that priority. Now, let me give you the EA-18G Growler in full detail, because this aircraft is the unsung hero of the Keshem strike operation and of every previous suppression of enemy air defense mission conducted throughout this conflict. The EA-18G is a two-seat electronic warfare variant of the FA-18F Super Hornet. It is physically similar to the standard Super Hornet, but its internal systems, its sensor suite, and its weapons loadout are configured entirely around one mission: finding enemy radar systems, blinding them with jamming, geolocating them precisely, and then destroying them with anti-radiation missiles that home directly on the radar's own emissions. The Growler's standard combat loadout for a suppression of enemy air defense mission consists of 4 AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missiles, an AN/ALQ-99 tactical jamming system capable of flooding enemy radar and communication frequencies across the complete electromagnetic spectrum, 2 AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles for self-defense if an Iranian aircraft somehow attempts to engage it, and on the wingtip stations, the ALQ-218 tactical receiving system. The ALQ-218 is the specific component that makes the Growler so devastatingly effective against radar-guided air defense systems, and it deserves its own explanation in plain terms. The ALQ-218 is a completely passive electronic support receiver. It does not transmit anything. It only listens. It receives every radio frequency emission in its environment and processes those emissions to identify the type of radar generating them, the precise frequency and waveform characteristics of the transmission, and the exact geographic direction and range of the transmitting antenna. Think of the ALQ-218 as a direction-finding receiver of extreme precision and sensitivity that can hear a radar antenna transmitting from dozens of miles away and tell the Growler's crew exactly what type of radar it is, where it is located, and what its technical parameters are, all without transmitting a single watt of its own signal that could reveal the Growler's presence to the radar it is hunting. The Growler knows where the radar is before the radar knows it is being hunted. Here is the complete kill chain that almost certainly produced the Keshem Island strike. The Growler enters the strait area completely passive, all active electronic systems off, the ALQ-218 listening for any radar transmission from the island positions. The IRGC radar site on Keshem activates to track the American drone that Iran is about to shoot down. The millisecond that radar transmits its first pulse, the ALQ-218 geolocates it precisely. The Growler's crew has the radar's exact position, frequency, and waveform. The Growler fires an AGM-88 harm. The harm homes directly on the radar emission at Mach 2. The radar site that just revealed itself by transmitting is destroyed before it can even complete the tracking solution it was developing. The drone control station at Gora, now stripped of its protective radar coverage and fully isolated from any air defense warning, receives a precision strike from an F-35 that was waiting for exactly this moment. Within minutes of the first radar transmission from Keshem, the entire air defense and command infrastructure of the island has been eliminated. This is the SEED mission executed exactly as it is designed to be executed. And the IRGC radar operators who activated their systems to shoot down the American drone essentially handed the Growler crew the targeting solution that destroyed their entire network. They transmitted. The Growler heard. The harm followed the signal home. Now let me give you the APKWS rockets and the two Iranian one-way attack drones, because the economics of this specific engagement tell a story about American military efficiency that deserves full analytical treatment. The two Iranian one-way attack drones that were already airborne and tracking ships in the strait when the Keshem strike occurred were destroyed by F-15E Strike Eagles carrying APKWS, which stands for the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System. The APKWS is a laser-guided rocket that converts an unguided Hydra 70 rocket into a precision-guided munition by adding a laser seeker and guidance fins to the rocket body. The weapons officer, in the rear seat of the F-15E, uses the aircraft's Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod to designate the target with a laser spot. The APKWS homes on that laser spot with precision accuracy. Each APKWS rocket costs approximately $25,000. The Iranian Shahed 136 or similar one-way attack drone costs approximately $30,000. The economic exchange rate of this specific engagement was American military forces spending $25,000 to destroy a $30,000 Iranian drone, generating what is essentially a $5,000 return on investment per kill in terms of asymmetric cost exchange. The F-15E firing APKWS rockets at Iranian drones is making money on every engagement compared to the cost of the drone being destroyed. This is the precise opposite of the economic exchange that Iran's drone swarm strategy was designed to produce, where cheap Iranian drones force expensive American interceptors to be used in their defense. When America uses a $25,000 laser-guided rocket to destroy a $30,000 drone, the economic logic of the swarm attack breaks down completely. The drone swarm makes sense when destroying each drone costs the defender more than the drone cost the attacker. When the interceptor costs less than the drone, the attacker is losing money on every exchange. The Growler, the F-35, and the F-15E with APKWS represent the complete electronic warfare, precision strike, and counter-drone kill chain that dismantled Iran's entire Keshem Island operational infrastructure this weekend. Now, let me give you the Courier situation in full analytical depth, because this is the most extraordinary diplomatic military coincidence of the entire conflict. And it tells you something specific and important about the relationship between the diplomatic track and the military track that no press statement from either side has directly addressed. President Trump dispatched a physical human courier carrying a revised memorandum of understanding to Mojtaba Khamenei's underground compound. Physical. A human being carrying a document, not an email, not a secure diplomatic communication channel. A person physically transporting a piece of paper to an underground bunker where the supreme leader of Iran has been hiding for over 3 months, communicating with the outside world through human messengers because he does not trust any electronic communication that American signals intelligence could intercept or use as a targeting solution. The MOU the courier was carrying contained the terms for an extended 60-day ceasefire framework. Revised terms. Terms that Trump's team had presumably developed in response to the previous round of negotiations, and that were being submitted to the Supreme Leader's office for his personal review and authorization. The courier had not returned from the compound when both sides pulled the triggers this weekend. The document was physically in transit, potentially inside the compound itself, being reviewed by whoever manages the Supreme Leader's communications when the drone was shot down, when the fighter jets took off, when the Keshem Island radar network was destroyed, when the ballistic missiles were fired at Kuwait. The most intensive diplomatic communication of the entire conflict and the most intensive military exchange of the ceasefire period happened simultaneously, within the same hours, while a physical human being carrying a physical document was somewhere between the surface world and an underground bunker trying to deliver a peace proposal. This is not a metaphor. This is the literal operational reality of the Iran conflict on the weekend of May 31st to June 1st, 2026. The diplomatic envelope and the fighter jets were in the air at the same time. Now, let me give you the Pezeshkian resignation report in the complete analytical weight it deserves, because this single development, if accurate to any degree, changes the entire strategic picture of the negotiations and explains the IRGC's behavior throughout the conflict more clearly than any other single piece of information available. Iran International, which is one of the most reliable Iran-focused news organizations operating outside Iranian state media control, reported this morning that Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has submitted a resignation letter to the Supreme Leader's office. According to the report, Pezeshkian's resignation letter states that hardline IRGC factions have completely taken over major government decisions and sidelined the civilian government entirely. Iran's state media is denying the report. Of course, they are denying it. Confirming that the president has resigned because the IRGC has taken over the government would be the most damaging single admission the Islamic Republic could make about its own institutional coherence. State media denial of an inconvenient true story is the most routine form of Iranian information management. The denial is not evidence against the report's accuracy. It is simply the expected response from a state media apparatus that denies unflattering, accurate reports as a matter of institutional policy. Now, let me explain why the Pezeshkian resignation report, if it has any truth to it at all, is the most operationally significant intelligence indicator of the entire conflict. The United States has been negotiating a peace framework with Iran through Araghchi's diplomatic team in Doha. Araghchi is a career diplomat who belongs to the moderate pragmatic faction of Iranian politics that Pezeshkian's presidency represented. If Pezeshkian is resigning because the IRGC has sidelined the civilian government entirely, then Araghchi's diplomatic team in Doha is negotiating on behalf of a government that no longer has authority over the military decisions that determine whether the deal's terms are actually implemented. The people sitting across the table from American negotiators in Doha may not be able to deliver what they agree to. They can sign the paper. They cannot make the IRGC stand down its ballistic missile launches, stop its drone operations, open the strait on the terms the deal requires, or surrender the enriched uranium that no dust, no dollars demands, because the IRGC hardliner faction has apparently concluded that its institutional survival requires it to maintain operational control over every decision that affects its interests, and the deal's terms directly threaten those interests by eliminating the Hormuz leverage that generates the IRGC's revenue stream and removing the nuclear deterrent that the IRGC views as its ultimate institutional survival guarantee. This is the structural crack in the Iranian negotiating position that has been visible throughout the conflict in the behavior pattern of mine-laying during negotiations, ballistic missiles at Kuwait during deal finalization, drone shoots during courier delivery, and now a president reportedly resigning because he cannot govern in the face of IRGC institutional capture. Now, let me give you the IRGC commander Hajizadeh directly, because knowing who is actually making the military decisions on the Iranian side is essential context for everything else. Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh is the IRGC Aerospace Force commander. He is the man who appeared on Iranian state television this weekend to personally claim credit for shooting down the American drone. He personally ordered the ballistic missile response against Kuwait. He made the statement about the IRGC's legitimate and definite right to retaliate against ceasefire violations. Hajizadeh is not simply a military commander implementing policy from above. He is an institutional actor making independent decisions about when and how to use the military force under his command in ways that directly undermine the diplomatic process that the civilian government is trying to manage. His decision to shoot down an unarmed surveillance drone while a peace courier was physically in transit to the Supreme Leader's compound was either made with Khamenei's explicit authorization, in which case the Supreme Leader is personally directing military escalation while simultaneously reviewing a peace proposal, or it was made without specific authorization, in which case the IRGC Aerospace Command is freelancing military operations against American assets during active peace diplomacy. Either explanation for Hajizadeh's actions this weekend is deeply problematic for the deal's prospects. If Khamenei authorized the drone shoot-down while receiving a peace proposal, he is negotiating in bad faith in the most direct possible sense. If Hajizadeh acted without specific authorization, The institution that controls Iran's most dangerous remaining military capabilities is operating outside civilian command authority. Now let me give you the Golden Dome because this global roundup story connects directly to the Iran conflict's long-term strategic picture in ways that extend beyond the immediate crisis. America's Golden Dome Missile Defense Initiative, the $185 billion national missile defense system, is going live this summer. Anduril and Palantir are building the command and control software backbone for the system. The Golden Dome is designed as a real-time network that links every American radar system, every American early warning satellite, and every American ground-based and sea-based interceptor missile into a single unified command and control architecture capable of tracking and engaging ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and hypersonic missiles aimed at the American homeland simultaneously. Think of the Golden Dome as the Aegis combat system scaled from a single warship to the entire continental United States, where Aegis manages the air and missile defense picture for a carrier strike group from a single command and control system aboard the flagship. The Golden Dome manages the air and missile defense picture for the American homeland from a single software architecture that connects every sensor and every interceptor into a unified operational picture. The specific relevance to the Iran conflict is the hypersonic missile dimension. Russia's Oreshnik and the class of hypersonic weapons that China is developing are specifically designed to defeat existing missile defense systems by flying at speeds and on trajectories that conventional interceptors cannot reliably engage. The Golden Dome's architecture, specifically its real-time sensor fusion across every available detection system and its integration of the most advanced interceptor missiles in the American inventory, is designed to provide the engagement capability against hypersonic threats that current generation missile defense systems cannot reliably provide. Now, let me give you the China dimension because the 7 consecutive days without a single PLA Air Force sortie near Taiwan and the report that a Chinese missile may have shot down the F-15E over Iran are two of the most significant intelligence indicators of the entire global strategic picture. 7 consecutive days without a PLF sortie near Taiwan. This is the longest pause in Chinese air activity near Taiwan since 2022. 7 days of complete cessation of the near-daily provocative flights that have become China's standard method of applying pressure on Taipei and testing Taiwan's air defense response protocols. The timing of this pause aligns precisely with America's most intensive military engagement with Iran. 2 possible explanations exist for why China would suddenly stop its near-daily Taiwan provocations during this specific period. The first is that China is providing diplomatic space to the United States during the Iran deal's critical final phase, signaling to Washington that it is not going to compound American strategic stress by simultaneously escalating Taiwan pressure while the U.S. is managing the Gulf crisis at maximum intensity. This would be a sophisticated diplomatic signal consistent with China's interest in a stable economic environment where the Iran conflict's impact on oil prices does not generate further American institutional attention to the Pacific theater. The second explanation is more operationally concerning. China is pausing its Taiwan provocations not to reduce pressure on America, but to observe. Every carrier strike group operating in the Gulf of Oman, every F-35 sortie over the Strait of Hormuz, every EA-18G Growler employment against Iranian radar sites is generating operational data about American military tactics, electronic warfare signatures, weapons employment patterns, and combat effectiveness that China's military analysts are collecting and studying with intense interest. The Iran conflict is providing the most comprehensive real-world demonstration of American air power and naval blockade effectiveness that China has had access to since American forces were last engaged in a sustained air campaign in the Middle East. And the report that a Chinese missile may have shot down the F-15E that was reportedly engaged over Iran is the most alarming single intelligence indicator to emerge from the entire conflict. Because if accurate, it means China is not simply watching the Iran conflict as an observer collecting data. It means China is an active participant providing weapons or weapons technology to Iran that are being used against American aircraft, which represents a direct Chinese contribution to Iranian military operations against the United States, regardless of how it is officially characterized. Here is the complete strategic picture of June 1st, 2026. Iran shot down an unarmed American drone over international waters, while a peace courier was physically in transit to the Supreme Leader's underground compound. The United States responded within hours by destroying Qasem Island's radar network and the Gore drone command and control node using the EA-18G Growler's passive geolocation and HARM missile kill chain. 2 Iranian attack drones were destroyed by F-15E aircraft using APKWS laser-guided rockets that cost less than the drones they destroyed. Iran responded by firing 2 ballistic missiles at Kuwait that were both intercepted. The Iranian president reportedly submitted a resignation letter saying the IRGC has sidelined the civilian government entirely. The IRGC aerospace commander claimed credit for the drone shoot-down on state television, and described it as legitimate retaliation. The Golden Dome missile defense system is going live this summer. China paused 7 days of Taiwan provocations, while potentially supplying the missile that shot down an American aircraft over Iran. The deal courier was in the air, and the fighter jets were in the air at the same time. The peace proposal and the military response coexisted in the same weekend because the institution that controls Iran's weapons has not authorized the institution that is negotiating Iran's peace to make commitments it will honor. The IRGC is not negotiating to end this conflict. It is fighting to survive it on terms that preserve the Hormuz leverage, the nuclear deterrent, and the institutional power that makes the IRGC the most powerful organization inside Iran, regardless of who the president is. Pezeshkian's reported resignation is the civilian government saying publicly what American intelligence has been watching privately for months. The people across the table from American negotiators may not be able to deliver what they agree to. No dust, no dollars, no Keshem radar network, no drone command and control. 2 ballistic missiles intercepted, 2 drones destroyed for less than they cost to build. And a peace courier, somewhere between the surface world and an underground bunker, carrying a document that the institution shooting down American drones has apparently decided not to wait to read before pulling the trigger again. Now let me give you the full operational significance of what destroying the Keshem Island radar network and the Gore command and control node actually means for Iran's remaining military capacity in the Strait. Because this specific strike was not simply a proportionate response to a drone shootdown. It was a systematic dismantling of the nervous system that gave the IRGC operational coherence over the Strait of Hormuz. Before this weekend's strikes, the IRGC's ability to coordinate military operations in the Strait depended on a network of radar sites, radio towers, and communication nodes distributed across Keshem Island, the smaller adjacent islands, and the Bandar Abbas mainland complex. Each node in that network served a specific function. The radar sites tracked the position of every ship transiting the Strait's navigable channels, giving IRGC commanders a real-time picture of where commercial vessels, American warships, and Allied naval assets were located at every moment. The radio towers provided communication links between the IRGC's naval units operating their fast attack boats, their drone launch teams positioned at various coastal and island sites, and the central command structure that authorized and coordinated operations. The Gore drone control station specifically served as the coordination hub for all unmanned aerial vehicle operations in the Strait region, which means it was the facility that directed every drone swarm attack, every one-way attack drone launched against commercial shipping, and every surveillance drone mission that the IRGC conducted since the ceasefire began on April 8th. Without Gore, the IRGC's drone operations in the Strait must fall back on ad hoc communication through backup systems that are less capable, less reliable, and less secure than the dedicated command infrastructure that just went offline permanently. Without the Keshem radar network, the IRGC's situational awareness over the Strait is reduced to whatever optical and passive sensors can observe from the mainland coast, which provides significantly less coverage, less precision, and less real-time tracking data than the island radar network provided. The practical effect on the IRGC's operational capacity is that coordinating a simultaneous multi-vector attack on commercial shipping, which requires real-time knowledge of target positions, communication between multiple launch teams, and centralized coordination of timing becomes significantly harder than it was before this weekend. The IRGC can still launch individual drones from individual positions. It cannot easily coordinate the kind of synchronized swarm attacks that its doctrine calls for and that its offensive capability depends on for maximum effectiveness. This operational degradation is cumulative, and it compounds every previous degradation that CENTCOM has inflicted on the IRGC's military infrastructure since February 28th. The Keshem Island strikes did not end Iran's military presence in the Strait. They reduced the command and control coherence that makes that presence militarily effective rather than simply present. Now let me give you the honest assessment of what the Pezeshkian resignation report, the courier situation, the drone shootdown, and the Keshem strikes combined tell you about where the deal actually is and what the realistic paths forward look like. Because holding all of these developments simultaneously produces a picture that is more complete and more sobering than any single element of the weekend's events. The deal that Rubio said could produce good news within hours, that Trump said Iran had agreed to not build or buy nuclear weapons for, that the courier was physically carrying to Khamenei's compound in revised MOU form, exists in a political environment inside Iran where the institution that controls the physical assets the deal requires to be stood down, the IRGC, has reportedly displaced the civilian government that is supposed to sign the deal and implement its terms. A signed MOU between the American negotiating team and Araghchi's diplomatic faction is not a deal that the IRGC has authorized if Pezeshkian's resignation letter accurately describes the institutional situation inside the Iranian government. It is a piece of paper that the civilian faction agreed to, and that the IRGC can choose to ignore, undermine, or actively violate the moment its hardliner commanders conclude that honoring the deal's terms threatens the institutional interests they have decided to protect at the expense of civilian government authority. The drone shoot-down while the peace courier was in transit is the clearest possible operational expression of this reality. Someone in the IRGC command structure authorized shooting down an American drone at the exact moment a physical peace proposal was being delivered to the Supreme Leader's compound. That authorization either came from Khamenei himself, which means the Supreme Leader is simultaneously receiving a peace proposal and ordering military attacks on American assets, or it came from Hajizadeh acting on his own institutional judgment, which means the IRGC is making military decisions about engaging American forces without waiting for civilian or Supreme Leadership authorization. Neither version of that story is compatible with a signed deal that the IRGC will honor in implementation. No dust, no dollars, and no deal signed by people who do not control the guns produces the outcomes that Besant's 3 red lines require. The uranium does not move because Arakchi agreed to it if Hajizadeh's faction controls the facility where the uranium is stored. The strait does not open because the MOU says so if the IRGC naval units that control the waterway have not been stood down by an authority they actually recognize. The nuclear program does not stop because a document in Doha commits to stopping it if the engineers operating the centrifuges answer to the IRGC hardliner faction rather than to the foreign ministry that signed the commitment. This is the structural problem that the Pezeshkian resignation report makes explicit, and that the drone shoot-down makes operational. The deal requires the civilian diplomatic faction to deliver what the IRGC military faction controls. And the IRGC military faction has spent 93 days demonstrating that it does not take direction from the civilian diplomatic faction. The courier is still out there somewhere between the surface world and Khamenei's bunker. The Keshem radar network is rubble. And the question of who actually speaks for Iran in a way that produces implementation rather than just signatures is the most important unanswered question in the entire conflict.